Have you ever had someone in your life, and I know you have, but you don't have to admit it, that you look at their life and you think, I could live their life so much better than they do? It happens to me every year at this time as we move into football season, and I think, I could live Jerry Jones' life so much better than he does. I'm a Cowboy fan. He owns the Cowboys, and I just don't get it. Okay? He has a great businessman, but he refuses to admit he doesn't know football. Right? And that just really bothers me. And I think, if I could just be him for a couple of years, I would be smart enough to hire somebody that knew what they were doing. Right? But I come to this point every year, and I have false excitement and false hope, and knowing in the reality that my team is going to be mediocre or just above that at best. All right? I know that to be true, and it's aggravating. And so I see his life, and I just know that I could do just as well. Right? And feel like I could do better. Now, all of us, I think we have people in our lives, whether it's kids or whether it's relatives or coworkers or bosses or employees, we look at their lives and say, if they would just do it the way I would do it, things would be so much better. Right? Now, the flip side of that is, though, we can't imagine that anybody could possibly live our lives better than we do. Right? We're the masters of our own lives. We've got it under control. We know how to do it better than anybody. If anybody possibly thinks they could live my life better than I do, they have no idea what they're talking about. Right? Because I get it. And that's how we look at it. So I say all that because we're starting this series today on how would Jesus live my life? And the idea of somebody else living my life is it's kind of hard to admit that somebody else could do it. But the truth is, that's what we're called to do, is to let him live through us, right? And so what we're going to talk about in the coming weeks is this idea is if Jesus were me in 2018, what would it look like? Now, there was a movement some time ago, the WWJD thing, what would Jesus do? The problem with that is that we imagine what it would be like to be a 300 AD religious leader living in our current time. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that each of us have been called to a life, whether it's a life of a teacher or someone in medicine or someone who's a grandparent or a spouse or whatever it is you've been called to do, because only Jesus was called to his life, and that was to save the world. And believe it or not, none of us were called to be Messiah. That was his gig, not ours. So the question is not how would Jesus be Messiah today in our lives. The question is, how would Jesus live if he had my life? Very different question. And so in the coming days, coming weeks, we're going to try and diagnose how would Jesus do that? How would he go into my home and live my life? How would he go into my place of employment and live my life? How would he interact with my family? How would he go to the grocery store or to the restaurant today if he were me? All right, and so we're going to use as a foundation for this the Sermon on the Mount. It's the longest teaching that we have of Jesus, and it's the most complete understanding of the foundation of what he expected his kingdom to be. And so we're going to start with it. And so if you turn with me to Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12 today, we'll start with Jesus' introduction to his kingdom. And he begins with these Beatitudes, which beatitude means blessings. Matthew chapter 5, verse 1, page 968, for using the Pew Bible. And again, I hope that through this series that we'll be able to walk away and say, okay, here's the truth that Jesus taught. What does that look like in my life? What does it look like for me if he were to live my life in my world where I am today? Matthew 5, verse 1. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So Jesus begins this declaration of his kingdom, the establishment of his kingdom, with this idea of the Beatitudes. This is the introduction of this incredibly long teaching of Jesus that is just so incredibly powerful for us and how we should live. All right? And so, three things that I want to point out today, and these are really a big deal. So, this is the foundation for everything we're going to say for the rest of the time in this series. So, pay attention today. All right? Jaguars played last night. No games on this afternoon that matter. So, let's focus. All right? So Jesus begins in these Beatitudes, as I said, which means blessings. And he says, and I have to be honest, I've struggled so many years with this passage. What in the world is he talking about? And I've fluctuated between different things. What was he saying and what was going on? And so about 10 days ago, 7 to 10 days ago, I started praying about, I knew this passage was coming. And I was like, Jesus, I'll be honest, I don't get it. I thought I got it, then I didn't get it, then I thought I got it, and I didn't get it. And it came very clear to me, you're just making it too hard, dummy. You're trying to make me say stuff I'm not saying. And it became obvious to me that I needed to quit seeing what the Beatitudes were saying to me and what Jesus was saying to the people who were listening to him, because it meant something totally different to them. And so, with that in mind, I went back in, and it was like, wow, okay, now it makes sense. It's really not that hard, right? So if you go through, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details in this, but if you go through each line of this, and each phrase, blessed are the poor, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, if you go through all of those, what you find is that Jesus was referencing passages in the Old Testament. He was connecting to things that the prophets had said about him. He was connecting to the psalmists that had written and the promises and the hope of the Messiah and what he would bring. And Jesus is going in front of these people that were raised with this teaching, knowing Messiah was coming, looking for the characteristics. He was saying to them, all of the things that you've been waiting for, it's here now. You don't have to look any farther. You've been waiting 1,000 years or more as a people for the Messiah to get here. I'm here. I'm fulfilling all of these promises that you learned from the rabbis. All of the things that you were looking for and hoping for, they're fulfilled in me today as the new king of this kingdom. You don't have to search anymore. You have found what you've been waiting for, and I'm he. I'm the one. The search is over. Well, that was big news for the people there. That was big news for what they saw going on. So Jesus, poor in spirit, Isaiah 61, mourn, Isaiah 61, the meek, Psalm 37, hunger and thirst after righteousness, Isaiah 55, merciful, Micah 6:8. I'm not going to remember these, but I'm just telling you that Jesus was quoting the people that quoted predictions about him. Everything you've waited for is finally here, and you can stop looking. So I tried to imagine how I could explain what that would be like for us. And I took myself back to my college years, and I took myself back to the process of dating people. I hated it. And I came to the conclusion with one of my good friends that we just decided that we would just never get married. We were in the same dorm, and so we started a club. We called it Bachelors to the Rapture. We had T-shirts, and it was like, there's no point in all of this. Well, somewhere in that process, I went on a retreat with our church, and I met this young lady that just bowled me over. And after 2 or 3 conversations with her, I was like, okay, I was wrong. Now, it took a while for me to convince her that it was a good idea. In fact, it took a long while to convince her it was a good idea. But it was like, wow, this is the one. And so the people that were there, Jesus was saying, look, I'm what you've been waiting for. Stop looking. Stop searching. Some people find that when they find a job. Some people will go from job to job to job until finally one day they go to something, and 30 years later they look back and say, wow, this wasn't even like work for me. I just loved it so much. You find that one thing, it's like, wow, this I can't wait to get another bad days, but I can't wait to get up and go do what I do because I love this. Some people find that in their career. And so spiritually, the Israelite people were just yearning and just hoping, when is this going to be fulfilled? When are all of these promises going to come together? And Jesus says, it's finally here. Now, hear me when I say this, that it's still true today. We live in a time and we live in an era when people are spiritually searching for something and they don't know what they're searching for. They don't have to look any farther than Jesus. You see, the problem is they look at us as Christians and they look at Christianity as a whole, and they hear stories about priests abusing children, and they hear stories about pastors failing, and they hear story after story about how horrible Christians are. But the problem is the answer's not in the preachers. The answer's not even in the churches. The answer's in Jesus. And Jesus would say the same thing today. You're searching and you're searching and you're searching for this reality. And here, I am what you're looking for. I am the King of Kings. I am the Lord of Lords. I am the one that will fulfill what you're looking for. Quit looking. And I think that's what the people heard that day. And so just as a side note, if you are here and you are searching for truth and you're trying to find it in different religions and different things, stop looking in religion and look to Jesus. Because he's got what you're looking for. So Jesus goes on, and it's very interesting. Now, this part's a little, hang in there with me, all right? But one of the things that Jesus talked about, and you have to look in the verbiage to see it, is that Jesus was talking about his kingdom as a present reality and a future reality at the same time. Okay, so look at the verbiage with me. Look at verse 3. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." A present reality. Those that realize spiritually they have no hope out in themselves, but only from God. The kingdom is a current reality. Look at verse 10. "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." It's a present reality. It's something they experience now. So the kingdom of Jesus Christ is something that is here now and present. We have a king. We are his subjects. The kingdom of Jesus exists today. But, if you look at verse 4, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." Verse 7, "They will be shown mercy." Verse 8, "They will see God." Verse 9, "They will be called children of God." And so Jesus presents his kingdom as it's a current and present reality, but it's also yet to come. Boy, that's just not logical for our little brains, right? But I tell you that because I think too many times we focus too much on the yet to come. We focus too much on what's awaiting for me after this body quits. We focus too much on the relief of all of the pain and the sorrow and the goodbyes. We focus too much on the eternity side of this, and we forget the reality that the kingdom exists now. It exists today. Jesus is alive and working in us and around us today. He established his kingdom here on earth, and it will last forever. Now, granted, there are things about afterlife that sound really good. No more physical pain, no more goodbyes, no more hurts, no more sorrows. That's a beautiful thing. But we can exist and live in the kingdom of Jesus Christ right now. Now, I've started to understand this more as we're trying to renovate our home. So many times I focus on the end result instead of the current reality. couple weeks ago, we laid wood floors, and it was like, yeah, that's good. Now I can't wait till the next thing gets done, and the next thing gets done, and don't take time to enjoy what we just finished. And you realize, if you step back and you stop and you realize how far we've come in a year in fixing this up, it's like, wow, this is really cool, but that's not where I camp. Where I camp is what's next. What's it going to look like when we're done? And I think we have a problem with that in our spiritual journey. We sometimes so focus on afterlife and we so focus on how great it's going to be that we miss the current reality that Jesus is living and working in us today. The kingdom is here and yet to come at the same time. And so I just want you to see in that, and I want us to understand that tomorrow morning when we get up and go to work or do whatever we're going to do, the kingdom of Jesus Christ is real and present then, just as it is right now. And we don't have to put off and wait for the good stuff. We can experience the goodness of the kingdom of Jesus Christ right now. And I think that was important for Jesus to communicate that. So it's not just something that it will be, but it is. And so when we go to our places of employment tomorrow, when we deal with our families today, or we go to the restaurant this afternoon, we are taking the kingdom of Jesus with us. We must never forget that. We represent his kingdom wherever we go as his followers and whatever we're doing. So the last thing, and now this is going to really just kind of propel us into everything else. The last thing Jesus said in this passage, I think, is really important. So look with me at verses 10 and 11 and 12. He said, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." And Jesus says something really powerful. I am fulfillment of everything that you've been waiting for. And here's what you need to know. It's worth, the kingdom is worth whatever sacrifice is required of you. It's worth anything that's called of you to give. Could be persecution. Could be your life. Could be a job. Could be a friendship. I don't know. But Jesus says, whatever I call you to give up for my kingdom, it is worth it. It's worth it. And he's saying it's not going to be easy, because those who are not in my kingdom, they won't accept my kingdom, and they won't like what my kingdom teaches, and they won't like what I do and who I am and who you are, who I am through you. But understand, it is worth whatever I require of you. Whatever sacrifice you are to give. And here's the deal, and you may not see it right away, but eventually you will be rewarded for whatever sacrifice there is. Because my kingdom's worth it. My kingdom's worth it. It's worth whatever you want to, whatever I called for you to give. It's worth dying for. One of the fascinating things about teaching is the curriculum leads us to a point each semester where we ask this question: for what are you willing to die? And the answers are phenomenal. Some would really disappoint you. The things that they're not willing to die for in general. But here are the typical responses. There's a list of 2 or 3 or maybe 4 people. You know what? I'd give my life for that person. Rarely is there a cause, but usually it's a person. Have you ever considered, honestly, what you'd willingly die for, or who? Now, put aside the bravado and all of the bragging. I mean, really? Have you really thought about it? Because I got to say, the list of people, it's pretty short. The rest of you I'll see in heaven. But there's some on the list, there's no question. There's no doubt. Immediately that decision is already made. But what is it that you will sacrifice anything for? Short list. And Jesus promised, not only here but other places, the promise is, if you sacrifice whatever I require of you, I guarantee you it'll be worth it. I guarantee you it'll be worth it. I'm worth giving your very life. And you know, it's interesting, the people that he was talking to, the disciples, it's exactly what they did. Started with Andrew, who was beheaded. Simon Peter, crucified upside down. We see John eventually exiled, and we can go one by one and see how they sacrificed everything because they decided it was worth it. So let's translate that to 2018. What does that mean? And I think the bottom line, as we go into how would Jesus live through me, the foundation principle of all of it is, I will give whatever the kingdom requires of me. Whatever Jesus wants, he gets. When I go to work tomorrow, when I go to school tomorrow, when I go to the restaurant tomorrow, when I interact with family tomorrow, whatever I do, everything that I do, it needs to be held under the microscope of Jesus as first. And that's what he calls us to. Didn't say it'd be easy. Didn't even say there would be times it wouldn't be fun. But it is the call. My kingdom needs to be first. And so I want to encourage us as we go through this journey, when Jesus begins to get specific about what we're to look like and live like, and we'll talk about how we can only do that when he does it through us. But what does it mean to live for the kingdom in 2018? What does it mean to make Jesus the ultimate priority in my life? Is there anything he's requiring of me that I'm not willing to give? Is there anything that he wants me to do that I've said, no, I'm not going to do it? Nah, too much pressure. Or maybe there's something that you are doing that you know it's time to give that up. Whatever he requires, he promises it's worth it. Kingdom first in everything we do and say. Let's pray.